wisdom is a rare commodity. It is much needed, not least in the interpretation of the book of Revelation, and twice in the book it is explicitly called for. The first time, when the number 666 is mentioned in chapter 13, and the second time in chapter 17. Here it calls for wisdom, or a mind of wisdom. Welcome to another tidbit from the book of Revelation. We have arrived in chapter 17. And chapter 17 begins as an explanatory vision to the fall of Babylon that was described during the last of the 7 plagues. Let us read just the first couple of lines from chapter 17. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters." Then it is told that he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and he saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast full of blasphemous names, 7 heads and 10 horns. Now what is interesting is that if you turn just a couple of pages in the book to chapter 21, verse 9, you find a description that is almost word for word identical for the first couple of lines with this description in chapter 17. That is, then came one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls full of the 7 last plagues and spoke to me, "Come, I will show you." And then the difference, not the prostitute or the harlot, but I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And he carried me away in the spirit to a great high mountain, where he sees the city of God, the heavenly Jerusalem. So, you have 2 cities, 2 women. Which of those do you want to marry, by the way? Now, these introductions are so much alike that you say they have a particular purpose as a comparison. And the point is that, or one of the points is that these are explanatory visions. They both have this section an ending. There is another double. In 19 verse 10, John falls to worship an angel and he's stopped. And a similar event takes place in chapter 22 verses 8 to 9. So these 2 explanatory sections of visions are framed by first one of the 7 angels with the last plagues, who shows John first Babylon, then Jerusalem. And then in the end they are framed by the scenes where he's bowing down to worship an angel and is stopped. The point of that is that we, after the plagues have fallen, now are shown a set of explanations, explanatory visions, and the event that immediately, historically follows the last plague is described in 1911. That is when Jesus returns on his white horse as the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. That is the second coming of Jesus. So back to chapter 17 and its explanation. The purpose of this vision in chapter 17 is described clearly. "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute." But the actual judgment of the great prostitute only comes in the end of the chapter, from verses 15 to 18. That is where a beast and the kings on its head destroys, eats up the prostitute. The marriage between religion and state power does not work. And further explanation of this last judgment of the harlot then comes in chapter 18. Now, this is a story about the beauty and the beast. Most times when modern media uses the theme of the beauty and the beast turns out to be a nice fellow. That is not the case here. By the way, the beauty is not that nice either. So this is a description of two enemy powers, two hostile powers, hostile to the Lamb. The beast is described in verse 8 with a unique expression. And let me read. The people on earth will marvel. They are amazed. They wonder. We have similar expressions earlier in regarding to the beast from the sea in chapter 13. Because it was and is not and is to come. That is a strange expression. But notice, this is a caricature of the description of God himself, who in chapter 4 verse 8 is described as the one who was, who is, and who is to come. Now, the beast was, is not, and is to come. Very close, but that's exactly the point. Close, a caricature, an imitation. It is not God, but it is someone who acts as if he or it were God. And then, of course, the description points back to the fact that this beast has died and has risen again. This is a revival of the political enemy power that persecutes the people of God, after a period where that power has been weakened, where there has been freedom, religious liberty for the people of God. And then follows in the details of the chapter, first in verses 9 to 11, a description of the 7 heads. And the heads of the beast are following in succession. That is, they are in chronological order. They are not there at the same time. That is the case for the kings, the 10 kings described in verses 12 to 14. They are there together, all 10, universally representing the world and the world power in the end. So the heads are in succession, the 10 king or the 10 horns function at the same time and will be destroyed at the same time. As we saw in chapter 13, the beast is alive in each one of its 7 heads. And then it calls for wisdom. And a lot of speculation has gone into what we cannot be sure of. That is, which are these 7 heads? Having noticed, first of all, that they are successive, people naturally think of, for instance, world powers throughout history, world powers who have persecuted the people of God. And one solution is, it is Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and then the time period in which John finds himself is the 6th one, that is during the Empire of Rome, and the 7th one will be the ecclesiastical power that persecutes the people of God later on in history. That is one solution. It is not without its problems. First of all, that would be the only place that you move outside of the historical frame of the book of Revelation. That is, you move back in time before the early church. Next, in Revelation 13, the parts that point back to Daniel 7 and its animals or beasts there become parts of the beast. The mouth is like the mouth of a lion, reminding you of the power of Babylon. Certainly to have each of the heads here identified as those kingdoms may seem, to me at least, a little strange. Are there other ways to look at it? One suggestion in this call for wisdom is a cautious one, but throughout the book of Revelation, the 6th period is conspicuously present. It is through the 6th period John moves into heaven. It is in the sixth period that the seal is inviting him, or that's the wrong way of putting it, during the seals that he's in heaven having a heavenly conversation. The description fills far more space. The same is the case with the sixth trumpet. So one suggestion is he's taken into heaven. This is the day of judgment, and he follows from that perspective in the vision what is going on. He looks back at history, he looks forward to the end. Now, that means that the 7 heads describe the 7 periods in Revelation. But we will move to the end. In the end, there is a battle, and it is, you have a foretaste. It is anticipated here and described later in the book. Here in chapter 17, verse 14, they will make a war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is the Lord of lords and King of kings. That is one of the names he's given a little later when Jesus returns to earth in chapter 19. And those with him are called and chosen and faithful. May you and I not only belong to the called, we all invited. May we also belong to those who are chosen, that has made the choice to follow the Lamb, and may we belong to those who are not only invited, not only have said yes, but also are faithful and continue to follow the Lamb wherever he walks. Thank you for listening to another tidbit from the book of Revelation.